I have a treat for you this week. I'm joined by the very lovely Bona M Santos, who's going to give us a reading of some of her Madku to inspire you to write for the next Poetry P call out. But the conversation is not all about poetry. Do have a listen and send Bona some feedback. If you don't have her contacts, send me an email and I'll pass on your feedback to her. So let's crack on with the podcast. A quick note, if you're listening on audio, over on YouTube there's a video version where you can read the poetry on the slides. But of course, if you have an ISA or a Busan membership, an email containing today's poetry will drop gently into your inbox. As long as I have the right email, of course. Anyway, why Madku? Well, I want to inspire you to write some senryu with humour and bite for the next submission period. As I said in last week's podcast, the gloves are off, and whilst I don't want you to write to offend, it is time to give vent to your frustrations. But more of that later. Shall we go and meet Bona? Bona, you and I met very briefly at Cincinnati at the Haiku North America conference last year, and you told me a little bit about your Madku. And that in turn set a train of research off and podcast episodes, which will include this one. Now, Bona, as you know, we're inviting poets to write Madku next month. At the end of the podcast, I'm going to elaborate a little bit about what we're actually looking for. But first, I'm looking forward to hearing how you define your Madku and how you came to write it.
Well, first off, Patricia, I just want to say that it was really fun meeting you at the HNA. It was very brief, but
Yeah.
I don't know what came over me when I started to talk to you about my mad haiku. And then suddenly you were sending me an email saying that you have doing some research on it. And that was really fascinating to me because I started listening to your podcast on the Senryu and the history of Senryu. And that was very, very interesting to me, especially how it progressed where women started to getting more involved with the writing of Senryu. And it's also fascinating how the writing of Senryu was done way before it became very popular as a social commentary during those times. And so now that we're writing Senryu and Mad Haiku in my way of doing it, it's just a way of expressing ourselves now in contemporary times, which is it's probably dealing with the same emotions,
Yeah.
but within the context of what we are dealing right now in contemporary times. So I wanted to mention this book that Susan Bush and I have written called Not Your Kids Nursery Rhyme Haiku, where we actually have kind of rewritten nursery rhymes during contemporary times. And so the interpretation that we had is more of the reality that's happening now, when in fact nursery rhymes before were more about social commentary about what's happening during the society, during those times. So in the same context, I am doing mad haiku by writing about my daily experience at work. So my haiku came about when I started writing at work to distress myself and provide some relief and getting a laugh out of that. I am in an industry where there's so much stress coming in, being very men centric. So I deal with a lot of different situations every day. And so I wanted to write in a sense to bring some relief. And I focus on making light and funny all those situations that I get involved in or witnessed to that are irritating or annoying. So I I get into writing in order for me not to get so worked up about the situations that I'm dealing with. So this is not about getting red in the face, mad, or about revenge. No. And I didn't want it to go beyond that because that will be a whole other set, another set of haiku writing. So it is more focused on the lower level of emotional reactions from irritations or annoyances that I deal with. And I'm thinking more of, let's say, making lemonade out of this lemon. Okay. So that is so satisfying to me and a much needed relief. So it's a win-win situation, basically.
I think it's far better to write poetry than to let your blood pressure rise in a steaming mass, isn't it? Yeah. But why Madku? Where did that come from?
Well, like I said earlier, it's a means of distress, but if you're talking about the term, that is also a very interesting thing because when I first wrote my mud haiku, I was thinking this is mad. And then I thought about this magazine and these old issues of magazines that I've read early on, and it's called Mad
Yeah.
Magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with that,
Yes.
but it's got this caricature of a guy, it's a funny guy with a gap tooth, and then at the bottom of it, it's called. He had a tagline. I think he's called Albert E. Newman, and
Okay.
the tagline goes, "What, me worry?" As I'm like, same thing with me. Like, who, me worry? Let's write haiku instead, right? So that's what I did. And that's why I called this set Mad Haiku. So not necessarily like mad, but hey, I'm mad, but let's laugh about it.
Yeah. Think that's great. I mean, I'd have to go back a long time when I was reading the Mad magazines, probably my late teens, early 20s, which I don't want to think how long ago that was, Bona. But yeah, I'm very familiar with that
You are.
front page. Yes, I'm sure most people are because it's like it's not a cult magazine in really, but it's certainly a very well known magazine, I think.
Actually, the comic strips there
Hmm.
are also social commentaries,
Mm,
really.
yeah, absolutely.
That's why it resonated with me, and that's why when I came up with it, like, yeah, this is it. I'm having my mad haiku. Yeah.
But like you said, definitely not revenge poems.
No.
No. Even though I can imagine I mean, certainly there are times when I would like to write sort of revenge poems and put them out there and think, ha, you know, you've been horrible to me, but this poem is going to be out in the world forever now, and people are going to know how horrible you are. But anyway, we're not we're, we're not looking at
I
that
have
sort of
those,
thing.
by the way. I have those, but it stays in that other section I was telling you about. Stays there.
Behind closed doors, absolutely. So we're not doing revenge, we're not making villains, at least not for publication. We're not making villains into poems about villains,
I
but
think
we are, like you said.
we make them likable maybe, or something funny out of it.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I think for me, I'd probably need a bit of distance to make some of them likable. But yes, if you can make them likable, that's great. And but in the best tradition of sort of the Senryu poem, bit of humor. It a bit of humor goes a long way, doesn't it, to
Oh yeah.
diffuse
Oh,
situations.
definitely, definitely.
Absolutely. So I think by way of illustrating what you're talking about, we're going to hear some of your poems. It's probably safe, like you said, to say that they're going to be inspired by your workplace.
Very much so. Walking encyclopedia. All I need is a simple yes or no. walking encyclopedia. All I need is a simple yes or no. So this is actually the first ever my haiku that I've written when I started doing this exercise. I haven't really been long in the haiku community. I probably going on 7 years, and I wrote this 5 years ago, and this was my first ever. And true story, I do have somebody at work who would come to me and and every time I ask her a question for a very simple yes or no, she would go on and on and on with a very long, I don't know, dissertation or something about something else. And at the end of this speech, I still have not gotten my yes or no. So that is quite annoying. But over time though, I have learned how to deal with it by as soon as it comes in, I go, I just need a yes or no, okay? I don't really have time for a long conversation, and then you can come back, when I have time and tell me more about it if you want. But right now, a yes or no will suffice. That's how this came about. And really, I always come back to this because it's just fun to
Yeah.
write, and it's real. And happy to say I have resolved that situation. Okay, this next one is tuning out the office chatterbox, work in progress. Tuning out the office chatterbox, work in progress. I know that probably everyone has had an experience in this one. I'm pretty sure you yourself, Patricia, have experienced this at
Oh,
work.
yes. Oh, yes.
And it's really hard, to tune this person out because sometimes it's the loudest person, or the loudest voice in the room.
Hmm.
And and it's funny sometimes because I already know, uh-oh, here she goes or here she comes. I would know right away. So the one thing I do to tune out this person is do not give them um, a minute or even a second of a pause, because that will be taken advantage of and it will turn into, a chit chat that will go on and on and on. So what I do is I just briefly look and just wave and go back to my computer or whatever I'm doing. So that will usually give them a hint that I don't have time for it. But sometimes if they're coming with the juicy, juicy tidbits, wow, can you resist that, right? It's really hard. But yeah, that's why I said it's a work in progress, because sometimes it works for me, sometimes it does not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's very
You
true.
don't
Yeah.
you don't want to get left out of all the juicy tidbits, don't you? Long Zoom meeting. I miss out on Taco Tuesday. Long Zoom meeting. I miss out on Taco Tuesday. Well, for this haiku, it's actually, I guess the long Zoom meetings that we're now all used to came about because of COVID.
Hmm.
And during COVID times, that's all we did.
Yeah.
And then it just carried over.
Yeah.
So it's turning out that not a lot of people now come to the office for a meeting because they want to Zoom. But
Mm.
sometimes the Zoom can just go on and on and on, without realizing it. Sometimes it's past my lunchtime.
Yeah.
And we do have Taco Tuesday, by the way. Although I'm not a fan of Taco Tuesday, but when you go beyond your lunchtime and you're hungry, and then you go to the break room and all the taco is gone, and that is really super annoying to me. And sometimes one of my assistants will say, "Well, you didn't tell me. I thought you didn't like taco." Yeah, but I just had this long meeting and I'm hungry. I'm just going, well, next time maybe I'll be on the lookout. When you have a long meeting, I'll set aside something for you. But this happens a lot, by the way.
Oh,
So I kind of now tell them that, hey, I'm going to have a long meeting here, so be on the lookout if it's on Taco Tuesday.
very wise, Bona, very wise. You have now a little group of poems that I'd like you to read to us because for me, they talk about how we sometimes let work take over our lives. So I'll hand over to you.
Crunch time. I ditch a date with my deadline. Crunch time. I ditch a date with my deadline. Well, this happens a lot, whether I like it or not. I usually set my deadline, my own personal deadline, like 2 days before the actual deadline. And usually I'm finding myself like moving the goalpost. Let's do it this afternoon or tomorrow or this tomorrow afternoon until the actual deadline comes. So before the actual deadline, I've already, basically changed my deadlines,
Hmm.
my personal deadlines.
Hmm.
But more often than not, though, I meet it because that's just how I work. I cannot let work be not done when I have set a time for it to get done.
Yeah.
So more often than not, this really happens. But I think it helps me to set an earlier deadline rather than the actual deadline in order to give yourself, some time to um, work on the actual deadline and get it done and not go beyond the actual deadline. I don't know if that makes sense to
No, it
you.
makes perfect sense. Thank you. Thank you very much. Um, the other thing I like about this one is uh it's not what you expect. Crunch time, I ditch a date. So you're expecting that there's some sort of romantic entanglement at the end of this crunch time, I ditch a date, but it's not. It's sort of totally unexpected with my deadline. It's a really unusual way of putting this poem together. I really enjoyed that sort of element of surprise, and it's sort of a belly laugh at the end of it. It's like, oh right, okay, it was.
Yeah, I actually had fun doing this myself. Crazy work day, nuts and bananas in the break room. Crazy work day, nuts and bananas in the break room. There are a lot of crazy work day at work, and it just so happens that we really have nuts and bananas all over the place in the hallways. We have like bowls of nuts and
Mm.
bananas in the break room. And I thought the play of words, is really funny. This one really made me laugh. Crazy and nuts and bananas, they all come together for me.
Oh yeah.
And in the break room, it's almost like, hey, before you have a breakdown or anything, So it's like the use of the break
Yep.
for me. It's fun to make it break room because sometimes people would come to my office, and say, I'm having a breakdown. This is crazy.
Hmm.
I'm going nuts. So I was just putting together all these words and I came up with this one. Workaholic, the donkey in us. Workaholic, the donkey in us. I think when I wrote this, it was a prompt from the haiku dialogue. It
Oh.
was yeah, I think it was a donkey.
Hmm.
And so happened that I was actually working a lot of different projects at that time. And I thought it was perfect. It was just me working like a donkey, you know. And I can be a workaholic, by the way,
Hmm.
because I can sometimes juggle like 4 or 5 different sets of projects at the same time because of my work. But I do compartmentalize it so that I'm able to finish them. But yeah, that's the workaholic in me.
When I was reading these three poems in particular as a bunch, I put these three together and I thought, I wonder what these three tell us about Bona. And particularly this last one, because I get the impression you work jolly hard.
I do. I mean, this is just work. And then after work, I still have to find time and space to write haiku.
Hmm.
And also in between work, at work itself, to write haiku.
Hmm.
But like I said, when I was writing this in the middle of work, sometimes I do stop in the middle of work. This inspiration comes to me and I just write it.
Hmm.
And, some of these haiku came about because of that. It's really satisfying to be able to put it in writing. And then when you see it, you get a laugh out of it, and it just kind of brings some relief. I
Yeah.
made another lemonade out of this lemon.
Oh, bless your heart.
Company lunch. We all give thanks the CEO is on vacation. Company lunch. We all give thanks the CEO is on vacation. I know, Patricia. This is all in the spirit of fun. Don't take me wrong though. When the company brings the lunch at work, it's really very, very good.
Hmm.
Everybody is so eager to go to the break room, or in our case, a huge conference room for this whole widespread company lunch. But the thing is, when the CEO is there, suddenly everybody becomes quiet. It's
Mm.
more like there's really no banter, give or take. Everybody was just busy eating, and then the CEO, of course, takes the oxygen out of the room and start talking, making small speeches. Um,
Oh.
but you know what? Well, we're having a good lunch here, so in that sense, we're having a good time. Well, on the other hand, we do have a lot of potlucks at work,
Okay.
which turns into a company lunch. And usually, when we are left on our own with this lunch, it can be noisy and full
Hmm.
of laughter, and it was just more enjoyable. Even
Hmm.
if the food spread is not as probably, as fancy
Yeah.
as the company lunch, it's just, I don't know, more freewheeling. People are more open to express themselves.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
try to encourage this to happen more sometimes. No, not necessarily when he's on vacation, but that's a big plus. So sometimes I give him a heads up. We're going to have a potluck. You're all welcome to go.
Hmm.
But of course, we are left on our own and enjoying this lunch.
Oh, I think it talks to something we can all recognize because we've all been there, whether it's the CEO or whether it's the head of your department or whatever. There is an atmosphere when the people higher up the food chain are in the room, I think. So I think this one really speaks to something we can all recognize.
These two haiku are kind of related.
Hmm.
So let me read them. Monday meeting. My voice goes unheard by the men in suits. Monday meeting. My voice goes unheard by the men in suits. Monday meeting. My voice gets heard by the men in suits. Monday meeting. My voice gets heard by the men in suits. This poems actually is almost like the story of my journey at work.
Hmm.
When I first started, you can hardly say anything during these Monday meetings because it's all the men talking. I'm in an industry where there's more men initially, but now, of course, a lot of women are getting in there in the workforce, which is a very good development, by the way. And yeah, it's really hard to get yourself heard when all the men are talking, and and sometimes there's a factor where, oh, am I going to say the right thing, or um will they even listen to me, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
But what I did though is to just quietly persisted
Mm-hmm.
and to better at work and to bring better results. That way I can actually say, hey, okay, this is what I've done, this is the result, and everybody is happy with it. Over time, I was able to prove myself that I am able to walk, toe in toe with this man.
Mm-hmm.
I can bring results to the table.
Yeah.
And so slowly but surely, you get yourself heard. And so that's when I wrote the second haiku or senryu, is it's a sense of relief
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, now I'm here. It's basically breaking some glass ceilings maybe. These two haiku for me is kind of like my journey at work. And I think some women probably can um, empathize with this. What do you think,
Oh,
Patricia?
yes, I think so. And I'm not the most patient person, so if I wanted to say something, I made sure I said something. I suspect you're much more circumspect and patient, and I wonder, how is it that you were able to contain yourself for a certain period so that you could bring the results in and then say, okay, here's my results, here's the results, this is what I've been doing, and they had once you had the results, they had to listen to you.
I put it in my work. I have
Okay.
to prove, like, I have to prove to them sometimes that my original idea was sound.
Mm-hmm.
I just let them probably get on with whatever they were saying, and then at
Okay.
some point, of course, they didn't get the result that they wanted, and I bring in, this is what I've always wanted you to consider. And
Uh-huh.
over time, they started listening to me, to my
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't easy, but you just have to be persistent about it, not get um put down by the fact that they went with the other guy, for instance, because I'm like, my time will come. Let's see how that goes. Well,
Mm.
usually at work, you try different ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the best ideas are not the ones that are being implemented until they are proven not workable.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then we go to the next until you finally get to, in some instances, to the one that I presented in the first place. It's a hard work. It's hard
Mm-hmm.
work, of course,
Yeah.
but now I could say that I have a voice on the table. I preside some meetings as well. It's still, by the way, with men.
Of course.
I'm still the only female voice there. A lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
but it's quite satisfying sometimes that they kind of really stop and listen to you.
Yeah.
And I think it's doable. It's
Yeah.
doable. We just have to be very persistent about it. That's all I can say. I mean, that's the way to survive in the businesses I'm in, I believe.
Oh, bless
And
your heart. Yeah. Yeah.
and write about it, and put it in there, put it in writing. So this too, when I wrote the second one, was really like, wow, that's quite a journey.
Yeah. We've progressed. We've made
Yes, we
progress.
did, didn't we, Patricia? We
Yeah. There's
did
still
it.
there's still a way to go for a lot of people, but yes, it's
Well,
coming.
it can be done. It can be done.
It can be done. And we have
And
one
this,
last one, Bona. This one.
oh yes. Morning break. The slow walk around the block to simmer down. Morning break. The slow walk around the block to simmer down.
S-
I'm still doing a lot of this, by the
Oh
way.
no.
No, no, hear me out. It's very helpful. It's
Okay.
very helpful, believe
Hmm.
me.
Okay.
Um, in the middle of the day, when I'm in the middle of something really challenging or like a hard project to do,
Hmm.
I would sometimes stop in the middle of it, right in the middle of it, regardless of what I'm doing, because I didn't want to get to the point of feeling overwhelmed by it.
Okay.
So I leave the office. And luckily, we have like behind the office, we're on the 15th floor, by the way. So I
Oh,
have
okay.
to go down, and there is this tree-lined small street at the back of the office. It's almost like you won't feel you're in the middle of the office buildings because it's a tree-lined street of residential houses, and there's got a lot of flower gardens in there, and all you see are these flowers and bird sounds. And it really helps me.
Hmm.
And it's also my haiku time, by the way. I
Oh.
use it to think of a haiku time. I consider it my Zen walk almost because all I think about is a clearing of the mind,
Hmm.
not thinking about work.
Yeah.
And usually I have a word in my mind that's playing that I want to use for a haiku, and it
Oh.
just so the walk around the block is like a simmering down of decompressing myself.
Hmm.
And at the same time, in my mind, there's this seed of a haiku simmering.
Oh.
you
Okay.
know,
Good advice.
it really helps.
Yeah, I
It really
mean,
helps.
thank you very much for that. Bona, what great advice for people in the workplace. Possibly not what they were expecting when they tuned in to hear some poetry, but it's been absolutely great. And I wanted to thank you very much for that. And I wanted also to highlight something that you mentioned, but I wanted to come back to it. You mentioned your work that you did with Susan Birch, and you called it the not your children's nursery rhymes. Am I right?
Not your kids, not
Not your
not your
kids.
not your
Okay.
kids nursery rhyme haiku.
Okay. And I want to put some details of that in the show notes so people can maybe follow up on that. But when we met at Haiku North America last year, it was last year, wasn't it? It's hard to tell. I'm getting old. Um, you very
What's that?
kindly gave me a little magnet, which spoke to me so much. And would it be too much to ask you to read it to us now?
Right. I think it was a Monaco,
Yes.
and the chapbook was a Monaco actually, a chapbook of Monaco, and it goes this way: Mary, Mary, quite contrary, breaking the glass ceiling.
That was it. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, breaking the glass ceiling. And I said to you, and I wanted to let other people know, I gave it to my daughter. It's on my daughter's fridge now because she is breaking the glass ceiling. And it makes me so proud to see another woman, certainly in the family, but another woman, regardless of whether it's in the family or not, going out there and breaking glass ceilings and getting her voice heard amongst the men because, well,
Oh yeah, I mean it's happening. It's happening. Whether it's happening. It's unstoppable, I
let's
believe.
hope so.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean we've gone so far. I believe that.
Yeah, I think so. Even though I'm not really in the workplace anymore, but listening to her, certainly, it would seem that it's a whole different ball game for that generation down. So thank you, Mona. Thank you so much for coming along and reading to us and for giving us this Senryu. And when we finished here today, I'm going to give people a sort of lowdown on what we're looking for in terms of the next call out session. But I think you've given us something great to go on with, some inspiration to go on with how to write Senryu with a little bit more bite, how to sort of give vent to your frustrations in the nicest possible way. And I thank you so much for coming along and doing it. Thank you, Bona.
Well, I think I should thank you, Patricia, for giving me this opportunity to share, how I approach work by writing mad haiku or senryu and give it a try. It's you gotta have to see the lightness of it in order to get out of those getting overwhelmed or getting so worked up.
Yeah.
Just chill.
That's right.
That's all I can say.
Well, we're going to chill. And I thank you very much for doing this for us. Cheers, Bona. Pleasure to see you. And hopefully, you never know, we might just get together at Haiku North America next year.
Oh, yeah, you gotta have to get to the West Coast, Patricia.
I'll do my best. Thank you so
Okay.
much. What a lovely person and poet. Thanks again, Bona, for spending some time with us today and reading us your Madku. Don't forget to head over to the show notes for some more information on Bona's book, Not Your Kid's Nursery Rhyme Haiku. There's going to be a link on there. So let's talk about what we're looking for when we read your senryu for the next call out. We'd like you to write hard-hitting, humorous senryu, but not venomous and not offensive, please. Tell us all about the ridiculousness, the frustrations of your life, or the world in general, and make these annoying, daft things we have to deal with into humorous and light poetry. Satirize your demons. This is an opportunity to de-stress with poetry. Now, some of you will be coming too late to this and won't be able to write for the topic I'm talking about. But don't worry. There'll be something else you can submit to. Just check out the submissions diary on the top of the submissions menu at Poetry P. See what we're up to. And of course, head over to YouTube if you're not there already. Write a poem or as many as you want for the video prompt. Just leave them in the comments for Linda to read. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to the Poetry P channel. You don't get much for free, but that is. Now, speaking of free, Poetry P podcasts are just that. And in order to keep them free, I do need some sponsorship. You can buy us a coffee, or even better, you can become a member of Poetry P. Most of the memberships offer you benefits too. I did mention one earlier. If you can do that, that would be great. All these options are just a click away via Buy Me a Coffee. Details on the Poetry P website. Also, a quick update on the Haibun Journal tendrils. I'm just waiting for the galley proofs to approve, then we're off. It will be available as a PDF or in print. Exciting or what? Okie dokie. I think I've reached the end of today's pod. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to send me feedback for Bona and I can pass it on. And I rely on you to tell your haiku friends all about the podcast, to write about us on social media, maybe even write a review on the podcast platform you use. Help me spread the word of haiku, please. So until next time, keep writing. And of course, if there's any info you need that isn't in the show notes, I'm at the end of an email. Ciao.